The city of Anjar, the unresolved or running river, also known as Haush Moussa, is located in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. Its name originates from the term Ein Gerha, which means the source of the Gerha River. The name possibly refers to another Arabic term, the Ein al-Jar, meaning water from the rock, after the streams that flow from the nearby mountains. The beautiful ruins of the Umayyad Palace City were recognized as a World Heritage Site in 1984. The Umayyad House was one of the major clans of the Meccan Quraysh tribe, who were the followers of Muhammad, and many of its members were part of the Sahaba, the companions of Muhammad. The Umayyad were rulers of the Arab Empire between 661 and 750, when it reached the greatest territorial expansion in its history. The dynasty created the Umayyad art, which can be seen in the Middle East, Northern Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula. In spite of their incontestable successes, several religious and social groups protested and spoke against the Umayyads, as they considered the Umayyads' kingdom to be against Islamic ideals. The Umayyads demanded that their subjects observe the religious laws, while some of them led a luxurious life, went hunting and drank wine, all of which was forbidden according to Islam. Anjar was founded in the beginning of the 8th century by one of the most significant Umayyad caliphs, Walid I. He was the 10th caliph of Sunni Islam and the 3rd member of the Marwan branch of the Umayyad dynasty. He achieved significant conquests on both the eastern and western borders of the empire, and many consider the heyday of the Umayyads and the whole Islam state to have been during his reign. The ruins, resembling ancient palace cities, have an extremely orderly layout and are a unique testimony to ancient Umayyad architecture, influenced by Roman city planning. The ancient city, whose ruins were only discovered by archaeologists at the end of the 1940s, was built at the crossroads of two important routes, one leading from Beirut to Damascus, and the other crossing the Bekaa and leading from Homs to Tiberiad. This was the only inland merchant city in the country. The area was previously inhabited, as indicated by the Greek, Roman, and Christian construction elements that were reused during the construction of the city walls. Excavations revealed a 385-meter by 350-meter rectangular fortified city, surrounded by walls and flanked by 40 towers. An ancient inscription, presumably from the year 741, can still be seen today in its original location. The 2-meter-thick walls were built from a core of mud and rubble, with an exterior facing of sizable blocks and an interior facing of smaller layers of blocks. On the interior of the walls, 3 stairways were built on each side. They gave access to the top of the walls, where guards protected the town. Anjar can be entered through 4 gates fortified by porticos, one on each of the walls. The area, laid out like a chessboard, was crossed by the 2 main axes starting from the gates. The main north-south axis, Cardum Maximus, and a lesser east-west axis, Decumanus Maximus, are superimposed above the main sewers and divide the city into 4 equal quadrants. The colonnades of the 2 main avenues were created according to ancient architectural principles. In its heyday, the city boasted of more than 600 shops, palaces, a Roman-style public bath, and a mosque. The main characteristic of the urban architecture used by Caliph Walid I is the geometric layout of the city. Both public and private buildings were laid out according to precise planning. The The big palace of the caliph, the main palace, and its adjacent mosque are located on the highest region of the southeastern quadrant, while the smaller palace reserved for the caliph's wives is situated to the north, across the Decumanus. The living quarters of the service personnel were across the Cardo. The service buildings and the public quarters were in the southwestern quadrant, where the streets were placed at right angles to each other. The large number of shops in the city suggests a large number of citizens, which led archaeologists to look for further residential areas. The ruins are dominated by the monumental tetrapile at the crossing of the two principal axes, as well as by the walls and colonnades of the Umayyad palace, 3 levels of which have been preserved. This partially renovated palace is the most significant building of Anjar. Sculptures from the Roman period and architectural and decorative elements created using a unique technique can also be seen. Some buildings, like the caravanserai, were built at the edge of the complex. The former resting place was surrounded by buffer zones, which were meant to preserve the visual integrity of Bekaa Valley, as it prevented new buildings being raised in the area. More evidence of the Umayyad dependence on the architectural traditions of other cultures appears in the Umayyad baths, which contained the 3 classical sections of the Roman bath: the vestiary, where patrons changed clothing before their bath and rested afterwards, and the 3 rooms for cold, warm, and hot water. The size of the vestiary indicates that the bath was more than a source of physical well-being. It was also the center of social life. Anjar was never completed, enjoying only a brief existence of a couple of decades. In 744, Caliph Ibrahim, son of Walid, was defeated in battle. The city itself was partially destroyed, then later abandoned. Still, the ruins of the city represent a unique example of 8th century town building and the town planning technique of the Umayyad Caliphate. Built at the beginning of the Islamic period, it reflects the transition from the early Byzantine style to the mature Islamic style, incorporating the different architectural and decorative techniques. The buildings of the city bear all the marks of the Umayyad civilization. Despite major restoration and reconstruction works, the different monuments of the Umayyad city of Anjar clearly demonstrate their functions and relations. The minutely planned layout of the city is reminiscent of a royal residence, of which the city palace of Diocletian at Split is the best example. Protection of the archaeological site is ensured through regular maintenance, and a buffer area where exploitation is minimal in order to preserve the beauty of the surrounding landscape. Additionally, the territory was classified as non edificandi, meaning that new constructions are not allowed.